Now on view at the Portland Art Museum, Paul McCartney Photographs, 1963 through 64, Eyes of the Storm, is an unprecedented exhibition that reveals extraordinary photographs taken by the beloved musical icon. Featuring recently rediscovered photos from Paul McCartney's personal archive, more than 250 pictures invite visitors to intimately experience the Beatles' meteoric rise from British sensation to international stardom. Curated by MPL and the National Portrait Gallery in London. Tickets and information at portlandartmuseum.org. Celebrate the best of our city's plant-based dining scene this Sunday at Circle V Portland. It's an all-inclusive walk-around tasting event featuring 10 chef collaborations from top vegan restaurants. So chefs from spots like Boxcar Pizza and Mama Doot, they'll be working together creating mashup dishes. Plus, there's going to be 14 beverage makers, even one of those giant grazing tables full of snacks. And the whole thing is a benefit for the nonprofits Growing Gardens and Urban Gleaners. It's all happening at Castaway Portland on September 22nd. Get your tickets today at circlevportland.com. In the past few years, small businesses around the Portland area have faced dozens of lawsuits alleging that they were violating the Americans with Disabilities Act. Many spent thousands of dollars to make repairs and try to avoid going to court, but there was something fishy going on. In fact, some lawyers say these lawsuits were basically extortion. Today on CityCast Portland, we're talking with Maxine Bernstein, staff writer at The Oregonian who's been covering the story. We'll find out who's behind these suspicious lawsuits, why local judges have begun throwing them out of court, and what needs to happen next to hold the people behind them accountable. It's Tuesday, September 17th. I'm John Notarianni in for Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. So you've been reporting on this string of over 40 pretty similar lawsuits that were related to ADA violations. They'd all been filed in the Portland area by a single lawyer. And earlier this year, you wrote about one of them that was filed against a Southeast Portland strip mall. What happened there? Walk us through it.
So in early August, the lawyers representing the family partnership that owns the strip mall went to court to ask a judge to dismiss the case. And so in court, the lawyer argued that their suit was not isolated, that there was a pattern of these suits brought by the same lawyer in Oregon and connected to actually a Tennessee-based law firm. And he argued that what his clients were facing amounted to extortion and was part of this pattern of these lawyers trying to wrest money out of these small businesses in the name of disability rights.
But let's back up even further. Like, what was it that the lawsuit was alleging initially?
The owners of the strip mall, out of the blue, received a letter last fall. And it was from a lawyer demanding that he bring his family business, the strip mall, into compliance with the American with Disabilities Act. And if he didn't make fixes to the property to make it accessible to people with disability, that he'd end up in court. And to avoid that, he should make the fixes and pay thousands up to $11,000 in attorney fees to avoid a lawsuit.
And what were the fixes? Like, what sort of things were they talking about needed to be fixed?
So they outlined, they needed updates on the property, including painted, properly marked parking space for handicapped, level surfaces so people in wheelchairs could get from the parking lot to the entrance of the facility, proper signage for these parking spaces. And so the business did it. It was concerned. They had never gotten any letter like this before or any notice of that it was out of compliance.
Okay, so that happened. They still ended up having all these fees associated with the lawsuit on top of all the expense that they just went to make those repairs as well?
Right. So the attorney who signed this letter to the business demanded that they pay, it was up to $11,000 in attorney fees to avoid a lawsuit.
Okay. I mean, ADA law, super important, like one of the great things that we do as a country. But this, I mean, even just this one sounds fishy. Like, how do these types of things normally go about? Like, if there was an ADA complaint, is this type of thing common?
So the Americans with Disabilities Act, it was signed in 1990 by President George H.W. Bush, said all businesses open to the public are required to be accessible and to make reasonable modifications for accessibility. But no federal office was set up to monitor or enforce the law, so it fell to the courts. So it's not unusual that it would end up in court, but under the law, it limited what a plaintiff could collect, it prevented plaintiffs from collecting monetary damages for bringing these type of claims.
Yeah, and that is something that happened in this case.
Right.
But I am curious, like, we're talking about one case. There had been a string of over 40 similar lawsuits. Like, what are other businesses that had been hit with these lawsuits saying? Like, what sort of similarities are we seeing?
So it was mostly small businesses. It was everything from like massage parlors and mini marts to these strip malls. And they were all taken aback because they had never seen anything like this. A lot of them had been in business for decades, and many of them were owned by immigrant families, and English was their second language, so they were unsure what to do, and they really wanted to respect the law and didn't want to be in violation. So many of them never got to court. They made the fixes and paid out the amount to avoid any legal headaches.
Yeah. So we're first generation immigrant businesses get this letter, this very official looking letter, and they just immediately decide that they need to pay up, that they don't want to be out of violation. I mean, and like we mentioned briefly earlier, like, yeah, that sounds like extortion.
Usually it was the owner's children that ended up dealing with a lot of this because their English was better. And there was one gentleman, his family owned a strip mall along Oregon 99W in Tigard for more than 30 years. And they got a demand letter out of the blue telling them that their property didn't meet federal disability access guidelines and must fix the problems. It gave a deadline within 30 days and pay attorney fees to settle or face lawsuit. And they ended up paying about $4,000, and they put in wheel stops in parking spaces, added van accessibility signs, restriped the parking lot. And he told me that, his parents were fearful, language was a barrier, and so they did what the letter demanded.
When did it become clear that all of this was a part of a larger pattern?
So the original strip mall owners, the Beck Family Partnership that went to court in August, their lawyers, they were about to settle the case before it got to court.
Okay, so they were almost like, all right, let's just pay.
Right. They put in like $16,000 to $20,000 work on this strip mall, and then they drafted a settlement agreement with the plaintiff's lawyer, and they asked for the plaintiff to sign it, the man who was named in the demand letter, not just his lawyer. And so his lawyer claimed she was given a general power of attorney to handle the settlement. And that threw up a red flag to them because that isn't supposed to happen. So they again demanded, we want, and his name was Connor Slavin, we want his name on that so we can be assured, this is a proper settlement. And this happened in other cases. The lawyer instead decided, we'll voluntarily dismiss everything. It just threw up red flags, and that's why they went to court to argue for the dismissal of this whole case. And then they, lawyers and the small business owners talk. And, I spoke to two business owners who, they met over coffee and they got the same demand letter. It looked like a cookie cutter type of letter that demanded the same fixes.
So it really was like the same language even in the letter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then they realized it was the same lawyer, and they, did a search in the federal court docket and found this one lawyer was responsible for bringing some 40 cases in the names of 3 different plaintiffs.
Oh my gosh. I really want to identify some of the characters in this story that are coming up.
Right.
Well, Maxine, there is a lot more to unravel here, but first let's take a quick break.
Think scaling AI is hard? Think again. With Watson X, you can deploy AI across any environment. Above the clouds, helping pilots navigate flights, and on lots of clouds, helping employees automate tasks. On-prem, so designers can access proprietary data, and on the edge, so remote bank tellers can assist customers. Watson X works anywhere, so you can scale AI everywhere. Learn more at ibm.com/WatsonX. IBM. Let's create.
Now, 2 pigeons bemoaning the fact you can stream DirecTV satellite-free.
These humans can stream all the top-rated national news channels on DirecTV, and now with no satellite dish.
This just in. Weather, sports, election coverage. DirecTV has it all, but something is missing. The satellite dish.
What are you doing?
I'm reporting the news. Back to you, Bob.
Here's some news. You're a buffoon.
Stream the top-rated national news channels. No satellite dish. Visit DirecTV.com. Internet required. Top-rated news based on 2023 Nielsen ratings.
Tell me more about this lawyer. Who is she? What did she stand to gain here? Like, what's her story?
Yeah, so she's a Portland attorney. This attorney, Jessica Mulligan, is alleged to have a connection with this Tennessee-based law firm. She's previously had her law license suspended for about 4 months in 2021 because she failed to keep her client informed about the status of a case. And she's denied any culpability in this. She said she was just working to fix these flagrant ADA violations.
She's just trying to help. She's just trying to help the ADA compliance, and just for a Tennessee law firm that is also just trying to help. Who's this Tennessee law firm? Like, this is the part that just makes it feel so shadowy.
So the name of it is Wampler, Carroll, Wilson, and Sanderson, and they're based in Memphis. And they are said to have brought some 200 similar type lawsuits and have worked with attorneys who are local in various states, such as Mulligan here in Oregon. But they got sort of slapped earlier this year by a chief federal judge in the Middle District of Tennessee. There was a case before the court there of a similar nature, and the judge issued a pretty scathing opinion throwing out the suit, describing it as a shakedown-like behavior for targeting multiple businesses with letters alleging these ADA violations and aggressively going after thousands of dollars in settlements. The law firm has not responded to my questions or emails.
Okay, so we're sort of setting out the cast. We've got this lawyer in Portland who had previously had their license suspended. We've got this Tennessee law firm with, like, honestly, kind of a supervillain name, Wampler, Carroll, Wilson, and Sanderson. But what I also think it's really interesting looking at the plaintiffs in these cases, right? The people who they're filing these cases on behalf of. I think that, like, that's such an interesting part of the story. In your reporting, you profile 2 of them, Connor Slevin and Justin Burley Beavers. Like, who are these people?
So Connor Slevin, he was a former Portland bartender. He suffered an unfortunate neck and spinal injury in 2020 in Mexico when he was hit by a rogue wave, and he was paralyzed from the neck down, regained some function. And he learned apparently from a friend on Facebook about these out-of-state lawyers who are said to specialize in disability access law, and they were looking to expand into the Pacific Northwest, and were looking for people who were disabled to examine and go out to different businesses to identify violations. So he got their Tennessee lawyers' contact numbers and reached out. And that's how he got involved. And then there was another man by the name of Justin Burley Beavers. He's a double amputee who lost his legs at the age of 10 months due to meningitis. He learned that there would be a way to, make some extra money by helping out with these lawsuits. Both were questioned directly by a federal judge in court, which is pretty unusual. You don't usually see a federal judge directly questioning the plaintiff. They're represented by a lawyer. Usually the lawyer does all the talking, but the plaintiffs, once these allegations were made, the judge wanted to directly question and find out what prompted the lawsuit, were they paid? And then they acknowledged, which was pretty striking to hear in court, that they got checks for $200 basically for each business they visited. And Connor Slavin told the judge that he was basically, and he told me later, that he was given a list of businesses each month, and he would just have to get a receipt, like make a purchase in a mini mart, or if it was like a massage place, he'd, pay for the massage and then get a receipt. And he had some type of, the Tennessee firm had a website, and he'd log in.
There's just like a web portal that they could file these receipts into?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. He'd upload the receipts, and then that would confirm how, he'd get $200 a pop for each location he visited. And then it resulted in demand letters and his name on these lawsuits. So when the business, this original Beck family partnership, asked to dismiss the case, he also wanted his lawyer dismissed. He wanted to withdraw from his lawyer.
Connor Slevin, you mean?
Yes. He said he got into this because he thought he could help and really improve things for people like him who were in a wheelchair and had trouble getting around. And he said he didn't realize that they were taking advantage of him and businesses.
And that's what I think is so fascinating about this whole story, right? Because, at a certain level, these weren't frivolous lawsuits, right? These are real businesses that have, violations of accessibility law, which, whether or not these are huge earth-shaking violations or not, people like Connor actually need to have this accessibility to be able to make it around the world. And it is the law that they have it. So we have this person who initially thought he was doing good work, but then on the flip side, it turns out that we are targeting these small businesses, many of them immigrant-owned, many of them people who don't speak English as a first language, so they're having a hard time even making sense of what these lawsuits say. I could see how this could be so confusing and so difficult to unravel.
Yes, and it was Justin Burley Beavers. I mean, they've been doing it for about 2 years before, it got to court and there were questions, at least in Oregon. Justin was saying that he would visit at least 3 businesses a month. So he was getting $600 a month for this. And his grandmother was taking him by van to all these locations. And they weren't necessarily locations in his, vicinity or his neighborhood that he would visit that would impact him.
Yeah, and looking at this, it's okay, so these plaintiffs, they're making maybe $200 for each business that they visit. But then that turns around and what are the lawyers and the law firm behind it standing to gain from all of these as well, right? Because I think you tallied it up. It could have amassed into the millions of dollars.
Yeah, well, it was actually one of the lawyers who estimated in court that this lawyer, Jessica Mulligan, in Oregon alone could have been paid $1.6 million in attorney's fees from both the in-court settlements and out-of-court settlements, while business owners were paying an average of about $2,500 to make the legal actions go away.
Mm-hmm. So, we started talking about this one lawsuit at the strip mall. You mentioned that had been thrown out by a judge. What's happening with all of these lawsuits and the plaintiffs and the lawyers? Like, where do we stand on this today?
So Jessica Mulligan, the attorney involved, is facing complaints before the state bar, and the state bar has initiated its own investigation as well. There was a motion for sanctions in court on one of these cases, for sanctions to be issued by the court against the attorney Mulligan by one of the businesses that faced the suits. And the business actually withdrew the motion, but the judge instead has requested Attorney Mulligan answer some specific questions. So even with the motion for sanctions withdrawn, the court itself can inquire further.
And what about our good friends at Wampler, Carroll, Wilson, and Sanderson in Tennessee? Is there any way we can touch them? Like, I don't understand what the legal precedent would be in a situation like this.
No, I think, similar suits are likely being challenged there as well, as they are in Oregon. One federal judge basically issued that firm a stern warning. I don't know if there are bar complaints there, but these cases are all related to that Tennessee firm. The checks that these plaintiffs were getting for every business they visited, that all came from the Tennessee lawyers directly with their names on it. So they're somehow tied to this, and there's specific opinions by the state bar that says, and at least in Oregon, an attorney may not ethically obtain from a client an advance blanket authorization over all settlement decisions.
Which is pretty much exactly what happened here. Yeah.
Right. And then there's another bar rule of professional conduct that bars lawyers from providing financial assistance to a client in connection with pending or contemplated litigation. And that's also what was done here. And the check came from the Tennessee lawyer. And I don't know if that's how they thought of getting around that, but that's the rules here in Oregon, at least.
Well, it sounds like at least in Oregon, there is attention being paid to this. There are going to be some ramifications for this whole scheme. But I'm wondering, for the businesses that were affected by this, for these immigrant first-generation businesses that sort of got wrapped up in these extortionary lawsuits, is there any recourse for them? Or is it just, sorry, buddy, got to move on?
I think maybe some will try to recoup the money that they paid out. I think they're waiting to see what the state bar does. And they're also, this is not the business, but Connor Slavin has filed a malpractice civil suit against his former lawyer, Jessica Mulligan, that's pending. And I know he's seeking damages for using his name in these cases.
Yeah. I mean, Maxine, you spend more time in courtrooms than any of us. You follow a lot of cases, a lot of criminal activity, a lot of lawsuits. How unusual is this one?
Oh, it's extremely unusual when, one lawyer from one side is accusing the other lawyer of extortion, and then the judge is pointedly questioning a plaintiff who is seated beside their lawyer, not questioning the lawyer, but lobbing questions to the plaintiff themselves about, who paid you, when did you receive the check? I mean, that was really something to see that you don't see very often in other cases.
Oh my gosh, what a mess. Well, Maxine, thank you so much for all your reporting on this and for bringing this out for all of us to know about. I mean, what a horrific situation, and I'm glad that at least in some cases, some justice is being served. But yeah, really, thank you for all your reporting on this. And thanks for coming on the show to talk about it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That's all for us today here on CityCast Portland. But again, thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend about it or leave us a rating or a review? We'd really appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow morning with much more from around the city. Until then, See you at Slim's.